Don't you just love the music of the Statler Brothers? Okay, either you do or you don't. I grew up playing that song on the country music station that I used to work at. That was like a lifetime ago, it seems like. I would play this song, and of course I used to sing along with it, but I had to change the lyrics somewhat. I didn't grow up a child of the 50s, I grew up a child of the 60s. One of the things in the song that sort of jumped out at me a little bit was, talking about watching people die on TV. And I remember that. I remember that as a child of the 60s, not a child of the 50s, but a child of the 60s. I have these recollections of the protests on television. You would watch people protesting the war, or the Vietnam conflict, actually. I remember some of the older teens in church and the community. Some of the older teens are actually drafted to be part of the Vietnam conflict. So I remember all this talk about war. War was a reality as I was growing up. Vaguely recall the funeral services on television for leaders who were assassinated. I have vague recollections of JFK's funeral or the one for Martin Luther King Jr. Most of all, though, I remember the images that I saw on the news. And maybe you remember those as well. If you're old enough, you remember seeing the images on the news of how problematic this conflict was. It was the first time it actually had happened. It was the first time that images of war made their way into our home. It used to be you had to go into the theater to watch the newsreel, but this time they were in our homes. And it really shook America. It really did. My family talked about peace, but since I came from a family of World War II veterans, the process to reach that peace was slightly different in my home than, say, it was from my pastor or Sunday school teachers. Those people would protest against the violence, and of course in my family, the way to attain the way to attain peace was through a forceful conflict to suppress the violence, to suppress the evil and the wicked people. I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever met a sane person who wants conflict. Most rational individuals that I know desire peace. But in a world filled with depravity and wickedness, what we fail to realize, some people fail to realize, there is always going to be violence. There will always be violence in this world. Now, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the world's idea of peace is this. It is a state of tranquility or quiet. It is a freedom from civil disturbances, a state of security or order that is maintained by laws and customs. It is freedom from disquieting thoughts and emotions. It is harmony in personal relationships. It is an absence of conflict between nations. So that's kind of what the world pictures when they talk about peace. There's peace in our heart. There's peace in our communities. People are held in restraint. Evil and wickedness is held in restraint by customs and laws. And nations no longer go to war against one another. But the Bible, of course, adds to that. The Bible does, when you say shalom to someone, there is that sort of understanding. May you find peace in your heart. But the Bible talks about a slightly different peace. In most instances in the Bible, what they are talking about when they say peace, it is directly related to a person's relationship with God. In John 14:27, Jesus speaks of this. He speaks of that kind of peace when he says, I am leaving you a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give, so don't be troubled or afraid. And the Lord's point here is this, that even if the entire world was at peace, a person's relationship with God would still be broken. And when we are not right with God, there is conflict in our hearts. And on the other hand, you can look at it the other way around. When our relationship with God is in order, why, we can experience an inner peace even though there is conflict all around us. So it's this peace that the angels were talking about when they announced the birth of Jesus Christ. When the angels said peace on earth, they were not saying that Jesus would remove all worldly conflict, but that the Lord himself, the Lord Christ, would remove the tensions and conflicts within us caused by a broken relationship with God. Now, question number 5 in our study guide here asks this question: do I understand peace in the same way that the scriptures explain it? Well, if you have expected an absence of conflict to bring you inner peace, then you've been looking in the wrong place. The peace that you desire in your hearts can only be found through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'd love to talk with you about that if you have time. You could just send me an email at greg.jones@fcob.net, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about ways to have that peace that only Christ can give. A peace that is not dependent upon an absence of conflict in the world, but a peace that only Christ can give between yourself and the Father. So if you want to talk some more about this, I'd be glad to sit down and talk with you at some point in time. Just shoot me an email and we can talk. So the peace that the world gives, the peace that the world suggests, is an absence of conflict all around us, an absence of conflict in our heart. But the peace that Christ says he will bring, and the peace that the peace that Christ brings as God sent him, is to restore that which was broken between ourselves and God. We are at peace with the Father. And if you're into biblical prophecy, yes, this is true. At a future date and a future time, Jesus Christ will bring a political peace. He will bring an end to personal conflict in this world when he returns again. But in the meantime, you and I have to settle for the only peace that Jesus can bring right now. And that is peace between ourselves and God. We'll continue to discuss this whole topic of peace tomorrow and transforming the world. Thanks for watching. My name is Pastor Greg.